10 Hell's Angels closed in on Mike Tyson like a leather-clad wall, fists clenched, chains rattling, boots grinding against concrete as they tightened the circle around the heavyweight champion. Tyson didn't step back. He locked eyes with the biggest one in front of him, rolled his neck, and did something that froze every single biker in place. What happened in the next 60 seconds would become underground legend, a story whispered about for decades in biker bars, boxing gyms, and back alleys across America. The biggest Hell's Angel in the room grabbed Mike Tyson by the shoulder and squeezed hard enough to bunch the fabric of his leather jacket. Tyson didn't flinch. He turned slow, the way a man turns when he already knows exactly how many people are behind him. What happened in the next 45 minutes would become Las Vegas legend, a story whispered about for decades in backrooms and biker bars from Nevada to New York. A story most people don't believe until they hear it from somebody who was actually standing in that room. Let me set this up fast because you need to understand where we are. It's 1996. Tyson is freshly out of prison. He's been away 3 years, locked up, stripped of his title, stripped of everything except that thing inside him that made him the most dangerous man on the planet. He's back in Vegas. He's training for his comeback fight against Frank Bruno. And he's got that energy around him, you know the energy I'm talking about. That post-prison Tyson energy, where everyone in his orbit could feel it. Electricity and gasoline. One spark away from something bad. Now here's the thing, nobody tells you about Mike Tyson during this period. He wasn't rolling around with a massive entourage. Not yet. The Don King circus hadn't fully reassembled. Some nights Tyson would just go out, him and maybe 1 or 2 guys. He'd hit a bar, he'd hit a club, he'd walk into places where a man worth $100 million probably shouldn't walk into alone. But that was Tyson. He didn't care. He never cared. Fear was a foreign language he never learned to speak. This particular night, Tyson rolled into a bar off the Strip. Not one of the glossy casino bars with the velvet ropes and the cocktail waitresses in sequined outfits. This was a rough joint. Dim lights, pool tables with torn felt. The kind of place where the jukebox plays Lynyrd Skynyrd and nobody asks for your autograph because nobody in there is impressed by fame. Tyson walked in with one guy. Just one. His name was Anthony, a friend from his Brooklyn days, not a bodyguard, not a trainer, just a guy who'd known Mike since they were teenagers dodging trouble in Brownsville. Anthony was stocky, tough in a street way, but he wasn't a professional fighter. He was a regular man standing next to an irregular human being. They sat at the bar. Tyson ordered a drink. For about 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Believe me when I tell you what walked through that door would have made most men find the back exit immediately. 10 Hell's Angels. Full colors. Leather vests with the death head patches. The bottom rockers identifying their chapter. The whole display of organized intimidation that the Angels had perfected over 50 years of owning every room they entered. These weren't weekend warriors or guys playing dress-up. These were legit 1%ers, the real deal, the kind of bikers who'd done time, done dirt, and didn't blink at violence because violence was the weather they lived in. They came in loud, boots on wood floor, chairs scraping as other patrons instinctively made space. The bartender's hand went under the counter, probably touching whatever he kept down there for emergencies, then pulled it back because he knew better. You don't reach for a weapon when 10 Angels walk in. You reach for your manners. Tyson didn't turn around. He sipped his drink. Anthony leaned over and muttered something. Tyson still didn't turn around. The Angels spread out across the bar. 2 went to the pool tables. 3 grabbed a booth. The remaining 5 posted up along the bar itself, about 15 feet from where Tyson sat. The biggest one, the one who'd eventually put his hand on Tyson's shoulder, stood dead center of the group. He was at least 6'4", 270 pounds, with a beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed since the Reagan administration. His road name was Crusher. I swear this happened. People actually called this man Crusher with a straight face and nobody laughed because laughing at his name was the last thing you'd do voluntarily. For a few minutes, the 2 groups existed in separate orbits. Tyson at the bar, nursing his drink, talking quietly with Anthony. The Angels doing what Angels do, which is making every square inch of a room feel like their personal territory. Then one of the Angels at the pool table recognized Tyson. Get this. He didn't whisper it. He announced it, loud, across the entire bar. Yo, that's Mike Tyson over there, the boxer. Every angel head turned. 10 pairs of eyes locked onto Tyson's back. And you could see it, you could physically see it, the calculation happening in real time. Because here's what most people don't understand about outlaw motorcycle clubs. Their entire power structure is built on one principle: we own every room we walk into. Nobody is bigger than the club. Not a celebrity, not a politician, not a cop, and definitely not a boxer sitting at their bar. Tyson felt the attention shift. He set his glass down. His shoulders didn't tense. If anything, they dropped slightly, settled. Anthony's shoulders, on the other hand, went straight up to his ears. Anthony had street sense. Anthony knew what 10 hostile men in a closed space meant. Crusher peeled off from his group and walked toward Tyson. His boots made that heavy, deliberate sound on the floor, each step a statement. He stopped right behind Tyson, close enough that his belt buckle nearly touched Tyson's back. "You're in my seat," Crusher said. Now, the bar had 20 empty stools. This wasn't about a seat. This was about something much older than furniture. This was a dominance ritual. This was a test. And every single person in that bar, from the bartender to the 2 old guys playing cards in the corner, knew it. Tyson turned around on his stool, slow. He looked up at Crusher, and here's the detail that always kills me when I hear this story. Tyson didn't look angry. He looked curious. His head tilted slightly, studying this enormous bearded man standing over him with hostile intent. It was the look of a predator encountering a new species and not being sure yet whether it was food. "I don't think it is," Tyson said. Quiet, almost gentle. Crusher put his hand on Tyson's shoulder. That's when he squeezed. That's where we started. Here's what nobody tells you about that moment. Tyson had been grabbed before. In prison, men had tested him. On the street, growing up in Brownsville, people had put hands on him constantly. Customato, his trainer and surrogate father, had taught him since he was 13 years old that the grab is the announcement. The grab is the telegram. The punch comes next unless you change the math. Tyson reached up with his left hand and took hold of Crusher's wrist. He didn't slap it away. He didn't twist it. He simply wrapped his fingers around it and held it. His grip strength was measured once at over 150 pounds of force per hand. For reference, the average man grips at about 70. Tyson could crack walnuts between his fingers without trying. Crusher's expression changed. Not all at once. It started at his eyes, which widened just a fraction, then moved to his mouth, which tightened. Because what he was feeling in that grip was a message, and the message was, "I could break this wrist right now, and we both know it. Take your hand off me," Tyson said. Same quiet voice, same almost gentle tone. But now his eyes had shifted. Something behind them had switched on, and it wasn't curiosity anymore. Crusher didn't move his hand. Pride wouldn't let him. Not in front of his brothers, not in front of civilians. The Angel's code is absolute on this point. You never back down. You never show weakness. You would rather take a beating than take a step backward in front of your club. But here's the thing about codes. Codes work when both parties are playing by roughly similar rules. Codes work when the consequences of breaking them are social. Embarrassment, loss of status, maybe a fine from the club, some internal discipline. But Tyson wasn't operating on that level. Tyson was operating on a level where consequences were measured in shattered orbital bones and collapsed windpipes. The code hadn't met Mike Tyson yet. 2 of Crusher's brothers moved closer. They flanked Tyson on either side, tightening the space. Anthony stood up from his stool, and one of the Angels, a wiry guy with sleeve tattoos and absolutely dead eyes, stepped into Anthony's path and put a palm flat against his chest. Anthony froze. Smart man, live man. Now it's 3 Angels within arm's reach of Tyson, 2 more closing in, and 5 others spread around the room in strategic positions, 10-2. Or really, 10-1, because Anthony wasn't a factor in this equation and everyone knew it. The math was ugly. The geography was worse. Tyson's back was to the bar, no exit behind him. The front door was past the pool tables where 2 more Angels stood holding cues that had suddenly become potential weapons. Tyson was trapped. Or at least, that's what the Angels believed. I need you to understand something real quick. Mike Tyson, at this point in his life, had a professional record of 45 wins, 2 losses, with 39 knockouts. He'd been the youngest heavyweight champion in history at 20 years old. He'd knocked out men who outweighed him by 50 pounds. In prison, he'd trained every single day, harder than he trained for any fight, because in prison, every day is a potential fight. He came out of that place carved out of granite, faster than he'd been before he went in, and carrying 3 years of compressed fury that he hadn't had a proper outlet for yet. The angels didn't know this Tyson. They knew the name, they knew the reputation, but they didn't know what was standing in front of them. They were used to civilians freezing, celebrities folding, tough guys in bars suddenly becoming very reasonable when the colors came out. They had no frame of reference for what they were confronting. Tyson stood up from the stool. Trust me on this. The simple act of standing changed everything. Because when Tyson stood, Crusher had to look him in the eyes rather than down at him. And when Crusher looked into those eyes, he saw something that bikers see in each other sometimes, that willingness, that absolute zero hesitation readiness to go to the most violent place a situation can go. But Crusher was used to seeing it diluted, spread across a group shared among brothers. In Tyson's eyes it was concentrated, pure, undiluted. Tyson still held Crusher's wrist. He hadn't let go. I said, "Take your hand off me." 3rd time. But different now. Harder. The gentleness was gone. What replaced it was a frequency, a vibration in the voice that the human ear registers as immediate physical danger. Crusher pulled his hand back, not slowly, not coolly. He yanked it, and the yank told everyone in the room something had shifted. The yank was involuntary. The yank was the animal brain overriding the biker code. One of the flanking angels, a shorter guy but thick, built for brawling, stepped in to cover Crusher's retreat. "You got a problem, champ?" he said, putting sarcastic emphasis on the last word. Tyson's jaw tightened. His hands hadn't come up. They hung at his sides, loose, fingers slightly curled. Any trained fighter watching would have recognized this as the ready position. Not a stance, not a guard, something more fundamental than that. The loaded spring before the spring uncoils. "I don't have a problem," Tyson said. "Do you? Now listen. This is the part of the story where most people expect the punch, the explosion, the legendary Tyson violence unleashed on 10 bikers in a bar off the Las Vegas Strip. And if this were a movie, that's exactly what would happen. Tyson throws a left hook, Crusher goes down, bikers rush in, Tyson becomes a one-man demolition crew, bodies everywhere, broken bottles, the whole deal. But that's not what happened. And what actually happened is, frankly, so much more powerful that it's the reason this story became legend in the first place. The shorter angel squared up. His chin jutted forward, his fists balled, and Tyson did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a mean grin, not a psycho sneer, a real smile, warm, almost friendly. And then he spoke, and what came out of his mouth was so disarming, so completely outside the script that everyone in that bar had been mentally following, that it basically short-circuited the entire confrontation. "You know what, brother?" Tyson said to the shorter angel. "I just got out of prison. 3 years. You know what I missed more than anything? Sitting in a bar and having a drink without somebody telling me what to do. That's all I'm doing here. Having a drink. Same as you." The shorter angel blinked. His fists didn't unclench, but his weight shifted backward, just half an inch, just enough. Tyson looked past him to Crusher. "I don't want your seat, big man. I don't want trouble. I've had enough trouble to last me 3 lifetimes. Sit down. Let me buy you a drink." Silence. Dead silence in that bar. No, this is wild from me. Just silence. Now here's what was happening beneath the surface of that offer. And this is what makes Tyson one of the most psychologically complex fighters who ever lived. He wasn't backing down. Offering a drink isn't backing down. He'd already established physical dominance with that grip on Crusher's wrist. He'd already won the eye contact. He'd already made Crusher yank his own hand back like he'd touched a hot stove. The hierarchy had been established in the first 90 seconds. Now Tyson was giving them a bridge, a way out of the corner they'd painted themselves into. He was saying, "You can walk across this bridge with your pride intact, or you can jump off and see what's at the bottom. Your choice." Cus D'Amato used to tell a young Tyson something that stuck with him forever. He'd say, "The hero and the coward feel the same fear. The hero just acts differently." Cus also taught him that the most dangerous moment in a fight is the moment after you've won. Because that's when the other man is most desperate, most unpredictable. The smart fighter gives the beaten opponent a way to stop fighting without losing face. That's exactly what Tyson was doing. Crusher stared at Tyson. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The room was a held breath. Then Crusher did something that shocked his own brothers. He pulled out the stool next to Tyson and sat down. Mark my words, that single act took more courage than any punch thrown in that bar would have. Because Crusher was breaking code in front of his brothers. He was accepting an offer from a man who, by the club's rules, should have been put in his place or at least made to move. Crusher was choosing reality over code, and reality said, fighting Mike Tyson is not a path to victory, it's a path to the emergency room. Tyson signaled the bartender, whatever he's drinking, and whatever they're all drinking. He pointed to the other 9 angels spread around the room. On me. The bartender moved fast. When Mike Tyson buys a round, you pour quick. Within 2 minutes, every angel in that bar had a drink in their hand, courtesy of the baddest man on the planet. And now the energy shifted again. But this time, it shifted in a direction nobody could have predicted. Crusher took a sip of his whiskey and looked at Tyson sideways. How was it in there? In where? Tyson said. Inside. Prison. Tyson turned his glass on the bar, watching the liquid move. You ever been? Twice, Crusher said. Then you know. Crusher nodded. Took another sip. Now picture this. The most feared boxer on earth, and one of the most feared bikers in the Southwest, sitting side by side at a dive bar drinking whiskey and talking about prison. 2 men from completely different worlds finding common ground in the one experience that strips everything away. No fame, no colors, no titles, just concrete and time and the daily negotiation of survival. Here's where it gets really interesting. The other angels started drifting closer. Not with hostility this time, with curiosity. Because they could see something happening between Crusher and Tyson that they recognized. Respect, real respect. The kind you can't fake and can't force. The kind that only happens when 2 dangerous men look at each other and acknowledge what they see. One of the pool table angels, a lanky guy with a scar running from his ear to his collarbone, walked over and leaned on the bar next to Tyson. I watched you knock out Spinks, he said. 91 seconds. I lost $50 because I bet it would go at least 2 rounds. Tyson laughed. A real laugh. The room heard it, and something physical happened, like a valve releasing pressure from a system that had been about to blow. Nobody bet on Spinks lasting less than a round, Tyson said. Even I didn't think it would be that fast. It was the right hand, the scarred angel said. He didn't even see it. Nobody sees it, Tyson said. That's the point. The angels started laughing. And just that fast, the dynamic in the bar had completely inverted. 10 minutes ago, this room was a powder keg. Now it was a campfire. Tyson was holding court, telling fight stories, listening to biker stories, buying rounds. Anthony, who'd been frozen against the wall since the dead-eyed angel had put a hand on his chest, slowly made his way back to his stool. He sat down next to Tyson with the expression of a man who had just watched a bomb get defused by hand and couldn't believe he was still breathing. But here's the part I need you to lean in for. Because the night wasn't over yet. About 30 minutes into this unexpected peace summit, the front door opened again, and in walked Trouble wearing a suit. 3 men, young, flashy, the kind of guys who wear too much cologne and talk too loud because they need everyone to know they exist. They were already drunk, coming from a casino, riding that Vegas high where you think you're invincible because you won a few hands of blackjack and had bottle service with girls whose names you'll never remember. They spotted Tyson immediately. And instead of reading the room, which was a room full of Hell's Angels who were now in a genuinely good mood, they decided to approach the champ. The loudest one walked right up to Tyson. Mike Tyson. Yo, my man, can I get a picture? My boys back home won't believe this. Tyson turned. He was polite. Sure, man, no problem. The guy draped his arm around Tyson. His friend pulled out a camera. Flash went off. And then the loud guy made his mistake. Yo, Mike, you really bit that dude's ear off? That's crazy, bro. You're crazy. Now, this was 1996. The Holyfield ear bite hadn't happened yet. That was 1997. But the loud guy was drunk and stupid and time confused, and he was referencing something that hadn't even occurred. Tyson's face didn't change, but Crusher noticed something. A micro shift, a tightening around the eyes. Because what the drunk guy was really doing underneath his sloppy friendliness was reducing Tyson to a punchline, a circus act, a crazy man who bites ears. And Tyson, who had spent his entire life being reduced and simplified by people who didn't know him, who had been called an animal more times than he could count, felt that reduction hit something deep. This is the vulnerability I need you to see. Mike Tyson, the most terrifying fighter of his generation, a man who had just peacefully neutralized 10 Hell's Angels through sheer force of will and emotional intelligence, was hurt by a drunk tourist's stupid comment. Because it touched the wound that never healed, the wound of being seen as something less than human. Cus D'Amato was the first person who ever told Tyson he was more than a weapon, and Cus was dead. And sometimes in moments like this, Tyson felt the full weight of that loss. His jaw clenched. His hand tightened on his glass. Crusher saw it. And what Crusher did next is why this story matters. The big biker stood up from his stool, all 6'4" and 270 pounds of him, and he stepped between Tyson and the drunk guy. He didn't touch the tourist. He didn't threaten him. He just stood there, a wall of leather and beard and absolute authority. "Show's over," Crusher said. "Take your picture and go." The drunk guy's smile melted. He looked up at Crusher, then looked past him at the 9 other Hell's Angels who were all now paying very close attention, and his drunk brain finally sent up a signal flare that said, "Leave. Leave now. Leave fast." The 3 suits were out the door in 15 seconds. Tyson looked at Crusher. Something passed between them that didn't need words. Gratitude, recognition, the understanding that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is step in front of another man's pain, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. Crusher sat back down, picked up his whiskey, took a sip. No, this is how legends work. They aren't about the punch. They aren't about the knockout. They're about the moment a man reveals something beyond what the world expects him to be. The world expected Tyson to start a brawl with 10 bikers. He started a conversation. The world expected the Angels to test the champ until blood was spilled. Instead, one of them stood up to protect him from a drunk tourist's careless words. None of that was in anyone's script. All of it was real. The night wound down around 2 a.m. The Angels had been there for close to 2 hours. Tyson had bought 4 rounds. Stories had been traded. Crusher had shown Tyson a tattoo on his forearm, the name of a daughter he hadn't seen in 6 years. And Tyson had listened without judgment because he understood absence better than most men alive. When the Angels finally got up to leave, something happened that the bartender would talk about for the next 20 years of his career. Crusher extended his hand to Tyson, not the aggressive grab from earlier, an open hand, an offer. Tyson took it. They shook, firm, equal. 2 warriors from different wars acknowledging each other's scars. "You're all right, champ," Crusher said. And this time, there was no sarcasm in the word. Tyson nodded, and then he said the line, the quiet power line that everyone who was there remembers differently, but the bartender swears he heard exactly. "I was never the monster they said I was." 7 words, under 15, and nobody in that bar said a single thing after. Crusher gave a short nod, turned, and walked out. His 9 brothers followed. The door closed behind them. And it was over. Anthony exhaled for what seemed like the first time in 2 hours. He looked at Tyson. "Mike, what the hell just happened?" Tyson finished his drink, set the glass down. "I had a conversation." That was it. That was his answer. Because to Tyson, that's all it was. 2 groups of people in a bar deciding not to destroy each other. Simple. Except it wasn't simple at all. It was a masterclass in power dynamics, emotional intelligence, and the kind of quiet confidence that can only come from a man who knows exactly how dangerous he is and chooses deliberately to keep that danger holstered. Now, if this story resonated with you, if you understand why this moment matters more than any knockout reel, hit that subscribe button right now. We tell stories here that nobody else tells, the real ones, the ones behind the legend. Subscribe and don't miss what's coming next. Here's the aftermath. Because every legend has a tale. Tyson went on to fight Frank Bruno that March, won by TKO in the 3rd round, reclaimed the WBC heavyweight title, stood in the ring after with the belt around his waist, and for a moment, just a moment, He looked peaceful, like a man who had found something he'd lost. The commentators talked about his power, his speed, his prison-hardened physique. Nobody talked about the bar. Nobody talked about the night he disarmed 10 Hell's Angels without throwing a single punch. The Angels chapter continued to ride. Crusher, according to people who knew the club, told the story of that night for years, but he told it differently than you might expect. He didn't tell it as the night they backed down from Tyson. He told it as the night they met a real one. In the Angels' world, that distinction is everything. Backing down is weakness. Recognizing a real one is wisdom. Crusher was wise enough to know the difference, and that wisdom probably saved his club a trip to the trauma ward. The bartender, a guy named Ray who'd been pouring drinks in Vegas since the early 80s, said it was the most tense and then most unexpectedly peaceful night he'd ever worked. He said he'd seen mob guys, he'd seen celebrities, he'd seen UFC fighters and NFL linemen and every kind of tough guy Vegas attracts. He'd never seen anything handled the way Tyson handled it. Most guys, Ray said years later, they either fight or they fold. Tyson did something else entirely. He just became the biggest thing in the room without even trying. It was like watching gravity work. Everything just moved around him. And that's the truth of Mike Tyson that the highlight reels miss. Yes, he could knock a man unconscious in 4 seconds. Yes, his punching power was measured at levels that would rupture internal organs. Yes, he was, pound for pound, the most devastating heavyweight who ever laced up gloves. But his real power was something else. His real power was the ability to walk into a room full of men who wanted to break him, and leave that room with those same men buying him drinks and calling him brother. That's not boxing, that's not fighting, that's something deeper, something rarer, something you can't train for in any gym. Cus D'Amato once said that discipline is doing what you hate to do, but doing it as if you love it. Tyson hated backing away from a fight. Every cell in his body, every fiber of his Brownsville upbringing, every hour of training in that Catskill gym screamed at him to respond to aggression with overwhelming, catastrophic violence. That was his programming. That was his default setting. But that night, in that bar, he overrode the programming. He chose a different path, and in choosing it, he proved something that all the knockouts in the world couldn't prove. He proved he was more than the monster. The story circulated through Vegas for years. It mutated, the way bar stories do. In some versions, Tyson knocked out 3 Angels before peace was made. In others, the Angels pulled knives and Tyson still stood his ground. In one particularly wild version, Tyson arm-wrestled Crusher for the right to stay at the bar and won in under a second. None of those versions are true. The true version is better. The true version is a man choosing peace from a position of absolute power. The true version is a Hell's Angel protecting a boxer from a drunk tourist's cruelty. The true version is 2 men, scarred by prison and hardened by violence, sitting at a bar and finding in each other something the world refused to see in either of them. Humanity. That's the legend. Not the punch. Not the knockout. Not the blood. The drink. The handshake. The 7 words a fighter said that hit harder than any right hand he ever threw. I was never the monster they said I was. And in that bar, on that night, 10 Hell's Angels believed him.